Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m., the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook page over to a new writer to talk about their books and their work. This morning, we are pleased to welcome Wendy Van Camp. Wendy is a graduate of the Ad Astra Speculative Fiction Workshop. Wendy has won honorable mention at the Writers of the Future contest, is a twice nominated finalist for the Elgin Award, and has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Her poems have appeared in Starlight, I knew I was going to mess that up, Wendy. Scifaikuest Review, Quantum Visions, Eccentric Orbits, and Far Horizons. She is the poet and illustrator of The Planets, a Scifaikuest poetry collection. Welcome, Wendy.
Well, thank you, Maddie.
I knew we would get through that, but we don't have a lot of poets on, so I'm really excited to talk to you about your work and how you approach your work. And you do so many different things. You are just a creative ball of energy. So I don't know, is there a place you want to start? Do you want to talk about your poetry and your unique approach to poetry?
I guess we could start with poetry. I consider myself to be a speculative poet, which means I write poetry in the genre of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Generally, I take my inspiration from cutting edge technology, from astronomy, and just my daydreams about the future. I tend not to be very political. I really don't want to get into that arena. I prefer the stars because they're timeless, and poetry that I wrote 10 years ago is just as vibrant and current today as it was when I wrote it. But I kind of became a poet by accident, in a sense. I was a novelist, as you well know, Maddie. I've been a longtime member of the SCWA. And my first book, of course, is The Curate's Brother, which is an Austen Regency historical romance. And it's the first of 4 books. I'm still working on books 2 through 3. But anyway, getting back to poetry, I just happened to be at a sci-fi convention. I was in the art show putting up my artwork, and there was going to be an ice cream social in about 2 to 3 hours after I was done in the art show. And I thought, boy, if I could just find something to do to occupy my time, and I'll do the ice cream social and network and then go home. And I just happened to be sitting in the courtyard, and right next to me was a sign that said Scifaiku Workshop. And I went, Scifaiku, what the hell is that? And I looked at the room, and I thought, it's hot outside. There's cold water and air conditioning in there. I'm just going to go in and sit down. So I did. And there were about, I'd say 6, 7 people in the room. So I thought, oh, good, I'm not the only one. So I took a glass of water and I sat down. Well, after a few minutes, one of the people in the group went to the front and says, hello, I am the instructor for the Scifaiku Workshop, which of course is science fiction poetry in haiku style. And she looked right at me and says, and you will be my only student. And I went, what? Who are these other people? And she goes, oh, no, these are my friends. They are all editors of national poetry magazines, and they're here to support me. And I went, oh, my God. And I really wanted to leave because that's a lot of pressure. I had not written a poem in 20 years, since high school, for goodness sake. And but I felt bad for the lady because here all these important people to her were there. And I didn't want her to look bad in front of them. So I hunkered down and I took her workshop. And it was excellent, by the way. At the end of the workshop, I wrote my very first Sifaiku poem. And then at the end, she says, now I would like you to stand up and read to the class. And again, I'm going, what class? I'm the only one here. And but I did. So I stood up, I read the poem that I just wrote, and I sat down. And then she started to do a critique of the poem, which was legitimate. But as she did, one of her friends in the audience leaned over and whispered in my ear, I loved your poem. I want to publish it. I'll pay you. And you know what? That was when I became a poet.
Magic words. I'll pay you.
That was it. And to this day, that poem published, I got $20 for that one, believe it or not, for 3 lines. That's definitely prorate. And then eventually I started illustrating my poetry, and I started selling the art prints and art shows. My illustrated poems published in a magazine called Quantum Visions for about 8 years. And they published short stories of mine as well. And it just sort of snowballed from there. I became a speaker on the National Science Fiction Circuit for poetry. And because I became so well known for putting together readings for fellow speculative poets all over the country, that the SFPA created a position for me to become their con coordinator. And I officially took the position last September, and I'm still out there doing what I do. In fact, I have a reading coming up this weekend. I'll be appearing at Flights of Foundry. I'm a panelist, and of course, I'll be doing a featured reading. And then my next big one will be at Balticon in Baltimore, which I will be there in person. So if you happen to be in the Baltimore area, or just stop on by and say hello. I'll be in the art show. I'll be teaching a poetry workshop, and I'll probably be in at least 8 or 9 panels. They put me everywhere, but that's okay. I go to work, so I sing for my supper, if you will. But yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. I do enjoy still writing novels, and I intend to keep up with it. I run a critique group for science fiction writers, and I'm there every month, right? Strong. I keep going. One chapter out of my steampunk book gets critiqued, so I'm slowly revising and working on it, and eventually it'll come together. And my Austen Regency is close. I decided not to publish any more books until I finish the series. I'm starting to realize that I belong to a rapid release kind of group. I don't know if you've heard of them or not, but they're called 20 Books. And they've trained me to think more in series, not in books. So
more than a standalone.
Exactly. To always try to, when you do novels, to do them in a series, complete your series first so that you are consistent in your details and that you can set your release schedule in a way that's the most profitable for you as an independent author. And I released my first books many years ago, and people loved it. And I'm constantly hearing, oh, when is the sequel coming out? When is the sequel coming out? Well, life has kind of intervened. I had to deal with a major illness for a few years. And of course, now that I'm more of a poet, I am a little bit distracted by that. But I am continuing to work on it. And I'm really hoping to finish up the series by the end of this year, and to maybe get Christmas in Kellage out in time for Christmas this year. That would be nice. So we'll see.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm sure everyone would love that. So I have a question though. Can you explain to everybody exactly what haiku is?
Haiku is an ancient poetry form developed in Japan. One of the big names is a poet by the name of Basho. He lived about, oh gosh, was it 500-600 years ago? So it's a poetry form that's been around a long time. It was mainly Japanese, but some time ago, maybe I'd say at least 80 to 100 years ago, eventually haiku translated into English. Now, English is a different language from Japanese, and so the syllable counts are not as easy for us to adhere to as it is in Japanese. Their syllables are different than ours. And then when you get to sci-fi-ku, which is science fiction themed haiku, because there's so many technical terms in science fiction, it becomes harder still. So haiku poets, basically, you don't really have to be 575 syllable in form.
Is that the formula for haiku? 575?
575 syllables is basically haiku and scifaiku. But in English, haiku and scifaiku and horoku and all the other kus that are out there, we don't adhere to it completely. We try to if we can, but it's better to be briefer sometimes. Haiku is more of the essence than it is the syllable counts. And as a poetry editor, I really try to stress that. In fact, my very first poem that I spoke about earlier, the last line of that poem was just a single word, 2 syllables. So it didn't really hear to it, but they loved it because the word silence was just, it just completed the poem in such a brief way, but it was so encompassing. And at the time, I really didn't know quite what I was doing because I was still that was literally my first poem, but somehow I had captured the essence of sci-fi in that poem. I credit my instructor. I guess I absorbed a lot more than I thought.
The ice
But
cream social. Yeah.
yes, and I did make the ice cream social.
That's good.
But yeah, it's hard to explain. When I teach my poetry classes, I like to stress that when you write haiku, it's a moment in time, a moment in space, and it's an emotion. And you, if you can, work in what is called a kigo, which is a seasonal word. But in sci-fi-ku, sometimes there are no seasons. My first poem was about being out in outer space where is no season. So I like to use time as kind of a substitute for a season word sometimes. But that's me. That's how I interpret my sci-fi-ku. And you'll find in the haiku society in general, these sort of things cause hot debates. So I don't want to get in the middle of that either.
No, I want to imagine a hot debate between a bunch of haiku experts. I think that would be
You
very
don't want to be
entertaining.
there. Trust me, they get very hot and bothered.
So
Believe it or not, there are conventions for haiku
I
poets.
believe it. Sure, of course.
It's actually become a worldwide phenomena. I just went to a convention. They just decided to put it online, so I was able to attend. And they had a haiku society from the Northern Africa. They had one from Asia. It was just phenomenal how many different areas and interpretations there were of haiku. It's really become quite the thing. And you know, today on the internet, because things are so brief, in our social media, short form poetry is really taking off. Poets can make a living on their poetry these days. It's really amazing.
So can we talk a little bit about the book behind you?
Sure.
The Planets. It's a Scifaikuest poetry collection, right?
The Planet's a sci-fi-ku poetry collection. Although in my defense, it's sci-fi-ku and astro poetry in haiku style. So, but basically what I do is I take you on a journey of the 9 planets of the solar system. And yes, I am showing my age. It is 9 planets to me. Although the number of planets these days is somewhat debatable in astronomy. But basically what I did is I researched the history of each planet, their physical characteristics, and I looked for things that made each planet unique unto itself. And I use that as the inspiration for my poetry. So as you read the poems, I'm hoping it'll inspire the reader to have their fancy tickled, like, what does this mean? And to look it up. And in that way, learn about the planets and basically go on a journey of our solar system. The book has been nominated twice for an Elgin Award, and the Elgin is for Best Speculative Poetry Book of the Year. And you know, the person that won is a friend of mine, so I don't mind. But and her book was excellent. But who knows? Maybe the next one, right?
You never know. Well, you know, this is really fascinating, and it sounds like particularly that the book that you were just talking about would be a great gift for anybody who's interested in the stars, who's an out of the box thinker, anybody who appreciates short poetry or poetry in general. Would you say that's accurate? Sorry, I
Astronomy,
missed that last part.
astronomy students.
Oh, the astronomy or budding astronomy student.
Yeah, it is. It's young people friendly. There's nothing, you know, overt in it. Like I said, I'm not a political poet. And so it's very clean, suitable for all ages, really.
So if somebody's interested in finding out more about you or buying your books or your jewelry or your art or whatever else you're involved in, how can they find out more about you and where can they buy your books?
Well, my books are basically on every online outlet, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Um, if it's online, it's there. Um, and of course, my website is nowastedink.com. So if you're interested in seeing my writing clips, places that I've published my poetry, my short stories, you can find a link to pretty much everything in my writing credit on my blog. Um, and if you are interested in reading my poetry in general, I actually recommend going to my account on Medium because I do publish, once I publish it in a magazine, generally within a few months, I will have it up on Medium as well, just in my account. I have several online magazines there that reprint my work. And it's a good centralized place to find my poetry. I do have a few short stories there too. I've written a lot of essays for Writing Cooperative about the ins and outs of writing in general, just writing craft kind of things or marketing things. And yeah, it's, trust me, just Google and you'll find me.
Well, I have a feeling that it would be a rabbit hole to go into your website and people would go in there and not come out for an hour or two.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I think I'm up to like over 1,000 posts on.
I went in and I was looking at it. I was like, oh, gosh, there's a lot of work and a lot of thought that goes into everything that you do. So I hope people appreciate that. And if they can support you, please, if you can buy Wendy's book or support her, leave a review. Look at the things that she does. If you're a budding poet, she's a good resource. And we'll be interested to see you have something coming out too, right? Another
I do actually.
publication.
My Eccentric Orbits anthology is due out anytime, literally within days. Let me, I think I pop one up here. This is
Any moment, folks.
one of Eccentric Orbits. The one that's coming out is volume 3. I was simply a poet in this one, but the publisher kind of invited me to become the editor for number 2, just because I just took it upon myself to do some marketing for the book because I wanted book 1 to be more successful. And he liked what he saw and he says, well, Wendy, would you like to become the editor? And I went, okay. I hadn't edited anything before that point. So I did. And now here I am on year 2, and the SFPA has invited me to edit An Eye to the Telescope this coming fall. So I am starting to become a poetry editor of all things. And it's been a really exciting adventure. I'm very happy about Eccentric Orbits 3. Many of the A+, A-liner poets in speculative poetry are in the book. I am completely astonished and grateful that these poets chose to support my annual because we don't pay for the poets, and most of them are well paid speculative poets. But I guess they saw something in this anthology and they want to support it. And all I can say is thank you. You have made a beautiful book. And the publisher and I are both very excited about this. And I think it's going to make a splash once it comes out.
We're excited for you. Wish you the best of luck. And please let us know in the future how you do. And I want to thank you and Diana and everybody who's been with us this morning. If you enjoyed our conversation with Wendy or you know somebody who you think would enjoy, please feel free to share it. Or you can go in a little bit of time after this. You can go to our SCWA Writers Online YouTube channel, where you can find this interview as well as other interviews with other writers. So we enjoyed our time here. We wish you health and happiness, and we will see you. I was trying to think of a star related exit line, but yeah, no luck this morning. But we will see you next week on the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. Bye, Wendy.